The crystal champagne flute felt cold and heavy in my hand, but my palms were sweating. Around the long mahogany table, the board members of Summit Logistics were beaming. At the head of the table stood Silas, the CEO, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon like it was a scepter. He tapped his glass with a silver spoon, the sharp ding-ding-ding cutting through the chatter. I straightened my blazer, my heart doing a little victory lap in my chest. This was it. After 6 months of sleeping under my desk and eating vending machine crackers, I had landed the Kensington deal. It was a $50 million contract that would save the company from bankruptcy. Silas had promised me a partnership. He had looked me in the eye and sworn we were a team. Silas cleared his throat, flashing that $1 million smile that had charmed investors for years. To the Kensington deal, he announced, his voice booming. And to the future of Summit Logistics. Everyone drank. I took a sip, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. Then, Silas turned his gaze to me. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It was cold, predatory, and empty. And in the spirit of that future, he continued, his voice dropping an octave, we have to make some tough choices to ensure efficiency. Which is why, effective immediately, we are parting ways with our operations manager. The room went silent. I blinked, sure I had misheard. Excuse me? I whispered, my voice trembling. Silas didn't even look at me anymore. He looked at the security guard standing by the door. Please escort Tessa out. She's being let go for gross negligence regarding the data files. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I stood frozen as the security guards stepped forward, their heavy boots thudding against the carpet. The humiliation washed over me like a bucket of ice water. The Kensington executives, people I had spent weeks charming, emailing, and reassuring, looked down at their phones, uncomfortable. They didn't want to witness the slaughter. Silas, I stammered, my face burning hot. What are you talking about? I built this deal. You know I didn't mismanage anything. Silas just sighed, acting like a disappointed father dealing with an unruly toddler. He reached under the table and pulled out a cardboard box he had already packed. He had planned this. He had packed my things while I was setting up the presentation room. Don't make a scene, Tessa, he said smoothly, placing the box on the polished table. It's unbecoming. We appreciate your efforts, but we need leadership that understands the bigger picture. Hand over your badge. My hand shook as I unclipped the plastic ID from my belt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But the shock had paralyzed my vocal cords. I felt small, stupid, and utterly powerless. I had given this man everything, my time, my sanity, my loyalty. And he was discarding me like a used wrapper the second the check cleared. The guard grabbed my elbow, his grip tight and unnecessary. Let's go, ma'am, he grunted. As they marched me past the glass walls, Silas turned back to the investors, already laughing at a joke, erasing me from existence before I even reached the elevator. My name is Tessa, and until 5 minutes ago, I was the reason this company functioned. To understand how much this betrayal hurt, you have to understand who Silas really was. On the surface, he was the golden boy of Chicago logistics. He wore $3,000 suits, drove a Porsche, and gave speeches about synergy. But behind the scenes, Summit Logistics was a sinking ship. Silas was never in the office. He was always on golf trips or networking dinners that cost the company thousands. 6 months ago, the company was drowning in debt. Vendors weren't getting paid, and our reputation was trash. I was the one who found the Kensington opportunity. It was a massive European shipping contract that required absolute precision. I pitched it to Silas, and for the first time in years, he looked interested. If you land this, Tessa, he had said, gripping my shoulder with a look of desperate intensity, you're not just an employee anymore. You're a partner. We share the profits. I promise. I believed him. I was 32, ambitious, and hungry for a win. I thought he was just a stressed leader needing support. I didn't realize he was a shark waiting for me to bleed in the water so he could feast. I threw myself into the work, ignoring the red flags, ignoring the way he would take credit for my ideas and emails. I thought that was just how business worked. I thought if I made myself indispensable, I would be safe. I was so incredibly wrong. The real work began 4 months before the firing. The Kensington contract wasn't just about moving boxes, it was a logistical nightmare involving strict European Union laws. One night, around 2 a.m., I hit a massive wall. The deal required a Grade A vendor compliance certification to legally operate in the EU. Without it, we couldn't ship a single crate. I ran the numbers. The certification cost $20,000 and took weeks to process through an agency. I marched into Silas's office the next morning. He was putting golf balls into a cup. "We need this license," I told him, showing him the paperwork. "We have to pay the fee today." Silas laughed, waving me off. "We don't have 20 grand, Tessa. Just figure it out. Use your charm." He refused to pay. He refused to even look at the forms. He told me to make it happen or the company would fold, and it would be my fault. I was desperate. I had a personal certification from my previous job, an advanced compliance officer license I had paid for myself years ago. It was attached to my name, not a specific company. Legally, I could act as the officer of record for the project. It was a risk, but I wanted to save the deal. So, I filled out the forms. In the box for license holder, I didn't write Summit Logistics. I wrote Tessa Miller. I attached my personal registration number. Silas never checked. He just signed the back page and went to lunch. For the next few months, I was a ghost in my own life. I missed my best friend's birthday. I missed Thanksgiving with my parents. I lived on coffee and anxiety. I was rewriting Silas's terrible pitch decks, fixing his pricing errors, and soothing the client. When Silas missed meetings, I was the glue holding the entire operation together. Every time I felt like quitting, I remembered his promise, partner. Then, 2 weeks before the firing, the vibe shifted. Silas brought in a new guy, a fresh college graduate named Kyle. Kyle was 22, wore expensive sneakers, and knew absolutely nothing about logistics. "Just show him the ropes," Silas told me with a breezy smile. "I want him to help with the administrative load so you can focus on the big picture." My stomach churned. It felt wrong. I asked Silas about my partnership contract, which I still hadn't received in writing. "We're family, Tessa," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder, looking hurt that I would even ask. "Don't be so transactional. The lawyers are drafting it. Trust me." I looked at Kyle, who was struggling to turn on the printer, and I felt a cold dread settle in my bones. Silas wasn't bringing me help. He was bringing in my cheaper replacement. But I pushed the fear down. I told myself I was being paranoid. The deal was too complex, he couldn't do it without me. The morning of the board meeting, the day of the toast, I walked into the building feeling a strange sense of calm. I had spent the entire night prepping the final slide deck. The Kensington reps were flying in to sign the papers. This was the finish line. When I swiped my badge at the entrance, the light turned red. Access denied. I frowned and tried again. Red light. The security guard at the desk, a nice man named Jerry who I bought coffee for sometimes, looked down at his screen, avoiding my eyes. "System glitch, probably," he muttered, buzzing me in manually. "They've been updating the servers." I thanked him, not noticing the pity in his eyes. I went up to my desk. My computer was slow. My email kept crashing. I assumed it was just bad tech luck. I walked into the boardroom with my head held high, holding the printed presentation that would secure $50 million for the company. Silas greeted me with a nod. The client was smiling. I felt triumphant. I didn't know that Silas had already met with HR. I didn't know that the system glitch was IT revoking my admin rights. I didn't know that in his pocket he had a script for how to humiliate me. I sat down, ready to be celebrated. 10 minutes later, I was on the street with a box of staplers and a shattered heart. I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring at the wall. It had been 24 hours since I was escorted out of the building. The shock had worn off, replaced by a deep, vibrating panic. I had no job. No savings, because I had spent it all on commuting and dinners while working late for Summit. And now, I had a black mark on my record. Gross negligence, he had said. It was a lie, but in our industry, reputation is everything. I tried to call my contacts at Kensington. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell them that Silas was a fraud. But every number I dialed went straight to voicemail. Then, I tried to email them from my personal account. It bounced back. Blocked. Silas had moved fast. He had cut the lines of communication before I even got home. Then came the knock at the door. It wasn't a friend. It was a courier. He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter on heavy legal paper. It threatened to sue me for defamation if I contacted any clients, employees, or vendors associated with Summit Logistics. It claimed I had proprietary knowledge and that any attempt to speak about the company would result in legal action that would bankrupt me. I held the letter, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a firing. Silas was trying to erase me. 2 days later, I met a recruiter I had known for years at a coffee shop 3 towns over. I needed a job, any job. I sat down, trying to look professional despite the dark circles under my eyes. I'm looking for operations roles, I said, handing her my resume. I just led the Kensington project. The recruiter didn't take the paper. She looked around the cafe nervously, then leaned in. Tessa, I'm going to be honest with you because I like you, she whispered. You've been blacklisted. My blood ran cold. What? Silas has been making calls, she said. He's telling people you embezzled funds. He's telling people you were incompetent and unstable. He's painting a picture that you had a mental breakdown. I felt like I was going to throw up. That's a lie, I hissed. He fired me to save money. She sighed. It doesn't matter what the truth is. He's the CEO. You're the fired employee. No one will touch you right now. You need to lay low. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like a criminal. He hadn't just taken my job, he had taken my future. A week passed. The rent was due soon. I was staring at the second envelope Silas had sent. It was a severance agreement. It was insulting, 2 weeks of pay. That was it. But the strings attached were made of steel. The contract stated that in exchange for this pittance, I had to sign a complete release of claims. I could never sue for wrongful termination. I could never speak about the company. I had to agree to a non-disparagement clause that lasted forever. I sat at my kitchen table, a pen in my hand. My bank account balance was hovering near zero. I had bills to pay. I was hungry. Silas knew this. He knew I lived paycheck to paycheck. He was banking on my desperation. He wanted me to sign my rights away so I could buy groceries. I felt tears prick my eyes. I was going to have to sign it. I had no money for a lawyer to fight him. I was beaten. I uncapped the pen, the ink hovering over the signature line. I was about to sign away my dignity for a few $1,000s. But then, my laptop chimed. It was an old calendar alert from my personal cloud account, Renew Certification. I frowned. I had forgotten about that alert. I pushed the severance papers aside and opened my personal laptop, not the work one they had confiscated, but my old, battered MacBook. I logged into the cloud drive where I kept my personal documents. I found the folder labeled licenses. I clicked on the PDF file I had uploaded months ago. It was the Grade A vendor compliance certification for the Kensington deal. I stared at the screen. I zoomed in. My heart skipped a beat. Then it started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The certificate clearly stated, license holder, Tessa Miller. Status, active. Designated project, Summit Logistics / Kensington Global. I sat back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Silas had never paid for the company license. He was too cheap. He had let me use my personal credentials. He had fired me, humiliated me, and blacklisted me, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. He didn't own the license that made his $50 million deal legal. I did. I called Mark immediately. Mark was an old friend from college who worked in contract law. We met at a greasy diner where we knew no one from the corporate world would see us. I slid the printed certificate across the table, along with the severance agreement Silas wanted me to sign. Mark read the documents, chewing on a fry. Then he stopped chewing. He looked up, a slow grin spreading across his face. Tessa, he said, tapping the certificate. Do they know this is in your name? I don't think so, I said. Silas never reads the fine print. He just signs things. Mark laughed, a sharp, barking sound. This is gold, he said. Under EU law, the compliance officer must be an active participant in the logistics chain. If you aren't employed there, this license is invalid. If they ship a single box using this number after firing you, they are committing international fraud. It's smuggling, Tessa. He looked at me with serious eyes. You have him by the throat. So, what do I do? I asked, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. Do I tell him? Do I demand more money? Mark shook his head. No. If you tell him now, he'll just pay the expedited fee to get a new license. It'll cost him money, but he'll fix it. You need to wait. He pointed to the severance agreement. Sign it. What? I asked, shocked. Sign the severance, Mark said. Take the 2 weeks' pay. Let him think you are defeated. Let him think you are gone and silent. The severance agreement prevents you from suing him for firing you, but it doesn't force you to maintain a professional license for his benefit. It's your personal property. I understood. It was a trap. I went home and signed the papers. I sent them back to HR with a polite, broken little note. Thank you for the opportunity. I wish you the best. I was playing the role of the crushed victim perfectly. Now, I just had to wait for the bomb to go off. The next 3 weeks were agony. I had to live on the tiny severance check and ramen noodles. I spent my days in my apartment, watching the world go by from my window. But my nights were spent stalking Silas on LinkedIn. It was infuriating. He was posting every day. Pictures of him shaking hands with the Kensington CEO. Posts about visionary leadership and trimming the fat. He was taking credit for every single thing I had built. He wrote a long article about how he navigated the complex EU regulations. I wanted to scream. I wanted to comment and expose him right there. But I held back. I watched the countdown. In one of his posts, he bragged, the first massive shipment for Kensington leaves in 10 days. A historic moment for Summit. That was my date. 10 days. I marked it on my calendar with a red Sharpie. The waiting was the hardest part. I had to be invisible while he danced on my grave. 7 days before the launch, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? Tessa? It's Kyle. The voice was whispery and panicked. It was the kid who replaced me. I don't work there anymore, Kyle, I said coldly. I know, but I'm freaking out, he stammered. Silas is screaming at me. I can't find the login for the compliance portal. We need to print the shipping labels, but the system keeps asking for a two-factor authentication code sent to your phone. Can you just give me the code? My heart slammed against my ribs. They were trying to use the license. They needed me. Kyle, I said, making my voice sound bored. I don't have access to those systems. They wiped my phone, remember? You guys handle it. I hung up before he could beg. They were hitting the wall. 2 hours later, my apartment intercom buzzed. I looked at the grainy camera feed. It was Silas. He was wearing a trench coat, looking angry. He knew I had spoken to Kyle. I debated not letting him in, but I needed him to believe I was scared. I buzzed him up. He didn't even say hello. He stormed into my small living room, filling the space with his expensive cologne and aggressive energy. You're sabotaging my employee, he spat. I didn't do anything, I said, backing away. Kyle called me. Don't play games with me, Tessa, Silas growled. If you withhold company passwords, I will sue you for breach of contract. I will bury you in legal fees for a decade. You will never work again. He reached into his coat and threw a check onto my coffee table. It was for $1,000. Consulting fee, he sneered. Give Kyle the codes. Stop being petty. I looked at the check. It was an insult. He thought he could buy me off with crumbs. I don't have the codes, Silas. It's an automated system. He glared at me, then turned to leave. Figure it out, or else. He slammed the door so hard the pictures on my wall rattled. The encounter with Silas shook me. I was terrified he would figure it out. If he actually looked at the paperwork, he would see my name. He would see that I was the compliance officer. The next evening, I went to a dive bar to clear my head. I ran into my old assistant, Jen. She looked tired. We awkwardly hugged. After a few drinks, she lowered her voice. It's chaos there, Tessa. Silas hired an external audit firm to double-check everything before the launch. He's paranoid. I nearly dropped my beer. An audit firm. If professional auditors looked at the files, they would spot the discrepancy immediately. They would see that the license holder was terminated. They would tell Silas to get a new license. He would pay the fee, delay the shipment by a week, and I would lose my leverage. My entire plan hinged on his incompetence. If competent people got involved, I was finished. The call from the auditor came the next morning. My caller ID showed a number from New York. Ms. Miller? This is James from Incomprehensible Audit Partners. We're verifying the vendor files for Summit Logistics. My hands were sweating. I had to answer this perfectly. If I lied, I could get in trouble. If I told the whole truth, the game was over. We see you are listed as the officer of record for the EU license, James said. Can you confirm this license is active and in good standing? I took a deep breath. Yes, I said. The license is active. It is registered to me personally, and it is valid until next year. Great, James said. And you are the contact point? I am the license holder, I repeated. I didn't say I work at Summit. I didn't say I was fired. I just confirmed the validity of the document. Okay, thank you, James said. Click. He just wanted to check a box. He assumed I was still there because my name was on the file. I let out a breath that lasted for a minute. I had bought myself time. 5 days to shipment. I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. I know what you're doing. And I want in. I stared at the screen. Who is this? A moment later, a picture loaded. It was a selfie of Mr. Henderson, one of the board members who had been silent during my firing. He hated Silas. He texted again. Silas cooked the books on the capacity numbers. If this deal fails, I can oust him. I know about the license, Tessa. I saw the audit report. I kept my mouth shut. But when you pull the trigger, I want 50% of the settlement, or I warn him now. I felt sick. A mole. Was he telling the truth? Or was Silas testing me? If I agreed, I was conspiring. If I refused, he might blow my cover. I decided I couldn't trust anyone. I blocked the number. I deleted the thread. I was doing this alone. If I went down, I went down solo. But now, the paranoia was eating me alive. 48 hours to shipment. Silas posted a video on Instagram. He was standing in the warehouse, wearing a hard hat, shouting over the noise of forklifts. Containers are loading, he yelled. History in the making. I sat at my computer. It was time to draft the weapon. I wasn't writing to Silas. I wasn't writing to the board. I opened a new email window and addressed it to the Global Legal Compliance Office of Kensington, the client. Subject: Urgent, Regulatory Notice, License Number 8944. I typed the body of the email. It was short, factual, and deadly. To whom it may concern, please be advised that the authorized compliance officer for the shipment is no longer associated with the transport entity. As the license holder, I am formally withdrawing my certification from this project effective immediately. Any movement of goods under this license number is unauthorized. I saved it to my drafts. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was it. The nuclear option. The night before the launch, a thunderstorm rolled over Chicago. Thunder shook my building. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. My apartment went pitch black. My Wi-Fi signal vanished. Panic clawed at my throat. Was this Silas? Did he cut my power? I rushed to the window. The whole street was dark. Just a storm. But I couldn't risk it. I needed internet access at exactly 9:55 a.m. the next morning. I couldn't rely on my spotty cell data. I grabbed my laptop, pulled on a raincoat, and ran out into the pouring rain. I found a 24-hour internet cafe 6 blocks away. It smelled like old coffee and damp carpet. I paid for a booth in the back corner. I sat there all night, shivering in my wet clothes, watching the clock tick down. 3 a.m. 5 a.m. 7 a.m. I was exhausted, but adrenaline kept my eyes wide open. I wasn't just fighting for a job anymore. I was fighting for justice. 9 a.m. The day of the shipment. I pulled up the Summit Logistics livestream on one tab and my email draft on the other. On the screen, the sun was shining at the shipping yard. A podium had been set up. Silas was there, looking like a king, shaking hands with the Kensington executives. A massive red ribbon was tied across the first truck. We are minutes away from the future. Silas boomed into the microphone. The crowd clapped. I watched the time. 9:45 a.m. The wire transfer of $25 million, the first installment, was scheduled to hit Summit's account at 10 a.m. once the first truck crossed the way station. 9:50 a.m. Silas cut the ribbon. The truck engine roared to life. 9:55 a.m. I took a deep breath. I thought about the security guard dragging me out. I thought about the ramen noodles. I thought about the gross negligence lie. I clicked send. I watched the screen. For a minute, nothing happened. The truck began to roll forward. Silas was clapping. Had it worked? Had anyone read it? Then, I saw it. In the background of the live stream, a man in a gray suit, the head of Kensington's legal team, checked his phone. He stopped walking. He frowned. He tapped the screen, reading something intently. His face went pale. He grabbed the arm of another executive. They whispered frantically. The man in the gray suit looked up, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Silas. He didn't look happy. He looked furious. He marched up to the podium, right in the middle of Silas's victory wave. He whispered something in Silas's ear. Silas froze. His smile dropped. He looked confused, then terrified. He shook his head violently. The man in the gray suit signaled to the truck driver. He drew a finger across his throat. Cut it. The truck slammed on its brakes. The live stream abruptly cut to a technical difficulties screen. I didn't need to see the video to know what was happening. I could imagine the chaos. In that boardroom, phones were ringing off the hook. The email I sent had triggered an automatic legal freeze. The Kensington lawyers would be screaming. You're shipping without a license. This is fraud. Silas would be screaming back. I own that license. And then, they would check the database. They would see my name. They would see the date of my termination. They would realize that for the last month, Silas had been operating an illegal ghost ship. The wire transfer would be blocked. The deal was dead in the water. The silence in the cafe was deafening, but in my head, it sounded like a symphony. I ordered a fresh coffee. I waited. My phone rang at 10:15 a.m. It was Silas. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. Finally, I picked up. Tessa. His voice was high-pitched, cracking with panic. Tessa, what did you do? I updated my employment status with the regulatory board, I said calmly. Just following the law, Silas. You killed the deal, he screamed. The wires are frozen. They're threatening to sue us for fraud. You have to fix this. Send another email. Tell them it was a mistake. I can't lie to the board, Silas. That would be unethical. I'll give you your job back, he pleaded. The arrogance was gone. He sounded like a drowning man. I'll give you the partnership. I'll double your salary. Just come in and sign the transfer paperwork. I took a sip of my coffee. I don't want a job, Silas. You fired me. I'm an independent contractor now. Fine. Whatever. What do you want? My rate for emergency crisis consulting is $5,000 an hour, I said. With a $500,000 retainer. Paid up front. To my personal account. Before I stepped foot in the building. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a defeated whisper. Okay. Come in. I walked into the Summit Logistics building an hour later. The receptionist's jaw dropped. The security guard, Jerry, gave me a confused wave. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the boardroom. The room was a disaster. Papers were everywhere. The Kensington lawyers looked ready to kill someone. The board members were huddled in the corner. And there was Silas, sitting with his head in his hands. When I walked in, the Kensington lead stood up. Ms. Miller? Thank God. Can you authorize the compliance transfer so we can move this cargo? As soon as the retainer clears, I said, checking my phone. A ping notified me. The money was there. $500,000. I sat down at the head of the table, Silas's seat. He stood up, looking small and broken. The chairman of the board stood up and pointed at the door. Silas, pack your things. You're done. Security entered, the same guards who had escorted me out. They grabbed Silas's arms. As they dragged him past me, he looked at me with pure hatred. I didn't even blink. I signed the paper. The deal went through. I saved the company, destroyed the man who tried to ruin me, and made $500,000 in an afternoon. I looked at the empty champagne glass on the table. Next time, I said to the empty room, you should read the fine print.